Today we're joined by Jeff Engelbert, a dynamic bluesman whose guitar work has carved him a respected place in the Northwest music scene. Known for channeling deep feeling in every performance, Jeff blends classic blues influence with his own modern edge, keeping the music alive and evolving for new generations. Jeff, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Gordy.
You got it. Hey, let's take you back to your inceptions, if you would, within blues and soul. Give me a rundown of how that came about, maybe defining moments of when you knew that this is what you were going to be doing.
Well, probably the first thing was, growing up where I did, I grew up in suburban Long Island, not far from New York City. So I got to hear a lot of the cool music stations that, a lot of the underground stations were playing a lot of blues music in those days. And the cool thing about it was it inspired me. I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to learn how to play guitar. I took guitar lessons at an early age, starting at age 10, learning how to play electric guitar. And I stuck with it right through probably high school and junior year, senior year of high school. I kind of put it down for a little bit to be captain of the wrestling team and be involved in sports and girls. But I picked it right back up, and then my freshman year of college, and I'd been by now, I started playing at 10, and by the time I was 14 or 15, I had worn the grooves out of so many records like
Hmm.
Michael Bloomfield and Albert King, BB King, Freddie King, the Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green, and all those guys, Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And I would listen to that stuff, and I thought, man, this stuff is really cool. I kind of like this stuff, maybe even better than the Hendrix and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and Santana. It just spoke to me, and it seemed to me that music had a whole lot more feeling and depth to it than a lot of the pop music. So that's what I was drawn to. And when I was a freshman in college, I had gone away to college, and a buddy of mine was going to school in upstate New York and told me about a rock and roll band that was putting together, and they were going to play some blues music. I hitchhiked 280 miles to go audition to that band, and I got the gig. So as a 19-year-old, I ended up quitting college and traveling and touring in a rock and roll band in upstate New York. And again, we mixed a whole bunch of different things in. Um, when I was a junior, senior in high school, I was exposed to the Allman Brothers, and that really deepened my interest in blues because when I would look at the cover material that they did, I was always notice who wrote those songs, and I started digging into all those artists that who wrote the stuff that influenced them, and I started listening to that. And again, growing up back where I grew up in the New York area, the radio stations were deep. They always had, besides just the local FM stations, there was always some, whether it was public broadcasting or an underground station that always was playing blues music a couple nights a week. They might only have it on for an hour or so, but you could always catch something really cool. And between having the opportunity to play classic rock and mixing some of those artists in, blues artists in, it just kept expanding my knowledge and expanding my want to learn more about that art of music, that particular genre of music.
Nice.
So as I got a little older, I started playing in bands. I had moved to Tucson, Arizona in 1980, and I continued the same thing. And I had a pretty cool job at the time. I was working for 2.5 years in a record store.
Hmm.
So you have a library of all kinds of stuff in front of you.
Hmm.
And the nice thing about it was when some of these artists would come to town, especially the blues artists, I would have a chance to not only just have them sign records and stuff, I'd have a chance to talk to them and get to go see them live firsthand.
Hmm.
So that just kind of expanded my desire to play, and I just kept learning more and more about blues. Um, my children were born in 85 and 86, late 84 and 1986, and I kind of put the guitar down for a little bit. But one of the things that it had inspired me was, when I was going to college also, I went back to Long Island to go back to school. I had a job that probably 99% of every musician in the world would want. And I got to work at the New York City Palladium
Hmm.
and Radio City Music
Hmm.
Hall and
Yeah.
Central Park for 3 years.
Nice.
So I got to see these people up
It's awesome.
close and personal. I got to walk them to their bus. I got to chat with them. And when I got a little older and I had been playing in a cover band, my son says to me, who, by then he was probably 22, 23, and he said, Dad, he said, why don't we just start a blues band? Straight up, nothing but blues. And I was like, okay. And I thought, he'd come far enough that he was talented enough in his own right. And it was kind of cool. And to have a father and son thing. And
Absolutely.
we kicked it off in 2007. Crosscut Saw was our name of our band in Tucson, and we played some amazing shows. I got to open for some incredible artists like Kim Simmons of Savoy Brown, Kansas, The Outlaws. There were a whole lot of people. Dennis Jones out of Los Angeles, and it was really cool because they looked at you like a peer, especially
Mm,
after they heard my band play, and they went, "Oh, these guys are not just your local amateur musicians here. These guys are the real deal, and they play it that way."
mm-hmm.
And I always took that to heart. I've always been a stickler about quality and professionalism at the highest level. And when we try to do our versions of these songs, we try to put our own little stink on them, do some different things that make people pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the opportunity to blend in our original material with it.
Nice. So, how did you end up landing in Boise of all places? I mean, you're here now. I don't know how long that's been, but
Well,
blues and
I had carved out a life in Tucson, met my wife there, had two children, and things were starting to change a little bit there, and we wanted to maybe make a different go to a different place, something a little cooler, because 35 years in the desert
right.
can scorch you in many ways.
Exactly, in Arizona for sure. Yeah.
And I was working in education sales for my day job,
Okay.
and somebody who I had connected with when I was in education sales earlier had taken a position as the regional VP in Seattle, and he had an opening in the Boise territory. And I reached out to him, unbeknownst to me that he had an opening.
Mm,
I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, Glenn, you got anything going on in the Northwest?" And he goes, "Yeah, I happen to have something in Boise." So I went through the whole process. I got the job, and we moved here lock, stock, and barrel, and started carving out. When the thing that I had that was a little different, Gordy, was my home was on the market and selling in Tucson. So my wife was in Tucson, and I was up here for 6 months.
mm,
So I was on an exploratory mission for 6 months. I went to
mhm,
see every band. I went to every open jam that I possibly could to really immerse myself in this community musically.
mm,
And it started to pay off. Within about a year and a half, I had kind of integrated with some friends and musicians at the Boise Blues Society, and carved out a little bit of a reputation. And by 2016, the end of 2016, I had my own band, and it was a bunch of young people, but their commitment to the music wasn't really kind of what I wanted. And I played with them for a while, but by 2020, 2021, I had started to meet some really good musicians here. And, for example, my keyboard player, Michael, he was with the Righteous Brothers for 10 years. He was their music director for 5 of those 10 years.
wow.
My bass player did the cruise ship and casino circuit, and he played in all kinds of bands, and toured with Weird Al Yankovic. My drummer toured and played with Eddie Money. So we have some really good guys that are kind of the same way that I am. They're perfectionists. They want to do it the best they can,
Mm,
but be as pure as possible. And the thing that I've learned is by doing that, we've also had the opportunity to open for some cool people here, and play on the same stage with some of these guys. And Johnny happens to be one of them.
mm,
I started working with Rick a couple years ago, and he had a show with Johnny here, and Johnny wasn't really happy with the band that he had. And I said, "Rick, why don't you have us play with him the next time he comes?"
mm.
And he goes, "You would do that?" And I said, "Yeah." So in October of 2023, Johnny was coming to town, and he had a show at the Sapphire Room, and we opened for him and played a set, and then we were essentially Johnny's band, and he liked us so much that he told Rick, he goes, Rick, I want these guys again when I come back to Boise.
Hmm.
So we are very committed to being as good as we can and to keeping it as pure as we can. um, Guitarists are a dime a dozen. They
Hmm.
really are. But the thing that I think separates musicians, especially guitar players too, is it's one thing to be able to have the technical skills, but it's another thing to be able to blend those technical skills with passion and emotion and
Hmm.
learning how to connect with your audience through the notes that you're playing.
Hmm.
And I learned a long time ago, it's not how many notes you play, it's how you play the notes
Hmm.
and how you draw people in. And
So
that, and that's
how do you do that? Like, what's the secret to that, to
the,
learning that?
the biggest thing is to let things slow down and leave space. That's the biggest thing that there is. So many young players, they want to play every note they ever learned, and they want to play it faster and faster every single time. Well, I could do that when I was younger, but did it make me any better? No. But now I'm really selective about what I play, because I want those notes to hit a chord with the people out in the audience. I want them to feel something when I'm playing a note. Maybe it's
Hmm.
only one note, maybe it's
Hmm.
only two notes, but I want them to feel it and know that I feel that they feel it. And that's
Hmm.
a big difference. It's hard to explain to people what blues music is sometimes,
Right.
because blues is everything. It's sadness, it's happiness, it's fun, it's failure, it's success. So you just kind of appreciate what you have, and that's kind of where I had a couple of health scares around 10 or 15 years ago, and I made a commitment to myself that after that, every note counts.
Hmm.
Every note counts. And the fact that I still get to play those notes makes me even appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And I am blessed to play with the guys I play with. Um, and they appreciate the fact that I do I don't like doing it, and I had never had a band with my name on it, Gordy.
Hmm.
I was always in bands that had a name.
Hmm.
But the reason I stuck with it is simply because people started to get to know me and my name and my music. And when I put this last group of cast of characters together, I said, "Hey, do you want to change the name?" They went, "Nope. You got all the contacts. Everybody knows who you are. Let's
Hmm.
just leave it alone."
Hmm.
And that's kind of how we ended up here. And we've had some, I've been blessed to play the Sapphire Room 15, 16 times. I've done 11 or 12 solo shows there. Um, I've had a chance to share the stage with a couple of really cool blues guys, Rocky Athis and Albert Cummings at the Egyptian Theater.
Hmm.
We opened for those guys. Again, we opened for Johnny, and we were Johnny's band almost 2 years ago. So those are the kinds of things that really keep us going, because it's a lot nicer and it's a lot more fun to play those gigs than it is to go and play in a bar.
Hmm.
Playing in a bar keeps you sharp, though. It's where you keep the knife sharpener working pretty well, so that
Yeah.
when you do play those other shows, it helps you make it count. That's kind of, I guess, what I would say.
Yeah. You mentioned this backstory with Johnny, which I appreciate you giving me the backstory behind that as well, which what I was curious about. But now you get to share the stage with them in a somewhat different capacity, right? Coming up in September 7th.
Yeah.
And many people would regard Johnny as somewhat of a soul blues legend, if you would. Like, what does it mean to be able to share, a stage and be able to be on par, I guess you could say, with others of his stature, and people look at you like you referenced earlier, with the type of respect that now you get to receive because you've kind of proven yourself, if you would.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. I because I had the opportunity to open for a bunch of other national acts, and talk to these guys. One of my favorite things I ever did was in Tucson. I got to open for Kim Simmons of Savoy Brown,
Mm.
and Kim was really widely renowned. rest in peace. He died a couple of years ago. But I remember just sitting down talking to him and thinking, out of a lot of these guys that I've met, he's just a regular guy. And if you aren't intimidated and you just treat people like that, they're going to
Mhm.
treat you that way back. And I remember when Johnny walked into the first thing we did was we hadn't had a rehearsal. So
Mm.
um, we were prepared and we had been working on his songs. We had all the audio stuff and the videos, but he didn't know us from a hole in the ground until we did sound check.
Mm.
And,
Wow.
and we played the first song and then we played the second song and he looked at it and he goes, "That's it. You guys are cool. Don't need to
Mm.
do anything else." And when we went back in the green room and just chatted, he was just such a cool, endearing, respectful guy. And I think he understood that, we weren't there to outshine him or anything. We were there to support him.
Mhm.
And, I had been listening to some of Johnny's music. I started after I'd moved up here. It was actually the first time I was really exposed to any of his songs. And I started listening to him before we ever played with him. And I thought, he's one of those guys that's the handful that's still left. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Right.
There's not a lot of those original blues guys. I did get to meet Buddy Guy at his club many, many years ago, and Buddy just turned 90.
Wow.
Um, and when you think about it, I got to see and chat with BB King many years ago when I was a freshman in college. I got to see Freddie King a couple of times. I got to see Albert King a few times. And you see these guys and you just go, wow. And I got to see Freddie King with Eric Clapton.
Nice.
And I hardly knew Freddie very much. I was going to see Clapton because, like
Mhm.
anybody else who plays guitar, Clapton's a
Right.
great guitarist. And what I saw Freddie do that night was Freddie took Eric to school. And and that stuck with me pretty hard. And I thought, wow, he can do that with Eric Clapton. What else can these guys do? So, it's really a cool thing to be able to chat with them, talk about music, and Johnny's really good about sharing stories.
Mm.
He's very cool about sharing stories, and
Which is
he was
why
just
blues music fits for him so well too, right?
exactly because he's lived it and he's been there
Yeah.
and he's lived it. And I was joking with Johnny when he was here, and I said, Johnny, I should have been a black kid who grew up in Mississippi. Instead, I was just a white boy from Long Island, and he loved it. That's cool. He goes, if you think like that, then you understand what this music's all about, and it really is. It's a pleasure to play blues music, and it's an absolute um, pleasure to play with a guy like Johnny because he's so cool and he's so giving. When we started playing the first couple of songs, he just kind of let me go,
Mm.
and I think he realized that I could play and I could hold my own, and he just let me go. And then he saw the rest of the band was the same way. So, and there's some video from that night where he was just glowing about how he was so happy that we were playing the way that he wanted us to play.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Seems
Yeah.
like you guys were like destined to cross paths then if that's the case. And
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm excited. And last year I tried to put something together with the Blues Society and another venue to have him come here and do something special, but it just didn't work out. So I'm glad that he's coming back this year. We're gonna have a chance to make some noise with him.
absolutely. Yeah. So, speaking of the catalog maybe that he carries and you knowing his music because you've had to help support him in that capacity, are there, particular tracks that are in his catalog that you kind of resonate with the most?
Well, there's a song that I can't remember the guy's name. I think his last name is Foster, and Johnny did this song with Otis Clay years ago called "Turn Back the Hands of Time."
Mhm.
And there's been a number of people that covered it, but to be honest with you, if you listen to the Johnny Rawls and Otis Clay version, it's head and shoulders better than anybody else.
Mhm.
A lot of people have covered it, and I had heard that song a long time ago, not ever really connecting the dots that was Johnny Rawls.
Wow.
But after prepping for that show 2 years ago, and I started listening to it, I went out and I listened to the other versions that were out there, and I went, man, this is the guy who has it right.
Mm.
He's got the feeling, um, and it was just so cool. Um, and I got to listen to some of his other songs. And he's like a lot of bluesmen. He's got some standards and covers that he does along with his music. Um, and it was funny when we had our first conversation in a while, a couple of weeks ago. And he goes, Jeff, he goes, and he kind of let me be the music director last time too. He goes, oh, I'm going to give you the songs and you just put them in the order and you do that and you do this. And he goes, Jeff, why don't we just stick to the same set list we did last time? And I said, okay, we can do that. And he hangs up, and 5 minutes later, he calls me back. He goes, Jeff, he goes, can we add that song I just did on my last record called Going Back to Mississippi? I said, absolutely. So I listened to that and I'm like, wow, this is cool. And my bandmates, when we've had a couple of rehearsals prepping for this show next week, and they just loved it. So we're pretty juiced about the show, and had a couple amazing rehearsals. I'm really proud of how things sound and how things worked out. And if you don't mind, I'm going to give my guys a plug.
Absolutely.
I got Eric Nelson. He's filling in and playing drums because he played drums with us last time. He was my regular drummer for a couple of years, and I didn't want to upset the apple cart with Johnny. I wanted to keep as many of the guys as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric Nelson's playing drums. Michael Each is, like I said, he toured with the Righteous Brothers. He's just an amazing keyboard player, amazing singer. My bass player, Paul Foti, he's playing bass that night. I've got Dave Westmoreland, and Dave has actually played with Johnny a number of times here in Boise. Mm-hmm. So, I had him play with me last time and this time, and Johnny loves Dave. I think he was thrilled to see that I had the same sax guy that he was familiar with. And I've got a special guest, Michelle Eastland, who's gonna get up and sing a couple of songs on my set. And then my bandmate Joe Ryan, he's a British blues guy. He's going to be playing in our opening set as well, but he's not going to be playing with Johnny. Nice. So, yeah, we're locked and loaded. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sounds like. One thing I want to kind of try to unpack, if we could, for somebody who's maybe green to blues and soul. And I know this is hard to try to describe it, but if you were to describe for somebody, what they can expect from your set and for the collaboration between you and Johnny, how would you paint a picture for somebody?
Well, I think, we do a couple of classics. We do some really good classic blues that some people will recognize. Some will be our arrangements of it. And we are going to end the set with one of my originals that fits into this world of the gumbo of blues. Mm-hmm. And all these songs that we're doing are going to complement what Johnny does. They're not going to step on it. They're going to be maybe they're not as R&B drenched as Johnny's songs are, mm-hmm. because some of his crossed over into that very quickly,
right?
As well as blues. So we try with our opening set to be as complimentary as possible, so that when we do play as Johnny's band, we're a different group of cats. We're playing different stuff that's going to complement what we did right before he came out.
Wow. That's awesome. This is making me really envision how you guys have carefully crafted what you're doing and how to construct this whole event that's going to be taking shape. So I'm excited to check you guys out front and center as well.
Good.
Yeah, this is phenomenal. We need to give you a final plug as well, Jeff. Where can people find you at if they're listening to this? Where do they catch you?
They can go to the band website. It's the JeffEngelbertBand.com. And I do keep it up to date with shows. I have a Facebook page also that is the Jeff Engelbert Band. And in the month of September, we have two shows booked. We're playing at the Green Acres Food Truck, which is a kind of a cool venue, mm-hmm. over at the west end of Ann Morrison, right on the Boise River there. And then we're going to be the house band for the Boise Blues Society monthly jam. But I got to say this because this is something I've been working on for almost a year. Mm-hmm. In December, because this is my roots. Okay, this is what I'm about.
Yeah.
And when I do a show like at the Sapphire Room, you know, it's a higher level show than your average bar gig. And I'm revealing this here for the first time publicly.
Exclusive. Let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah, we're going to do a tribute to the Three Kings, December 12th at the
Nice.
Sapphire Room. And it's
Okay.
going to feature the music of Albert
Mm-hmm.
King, BB
Mm-hmm.
King,
Uh-huh.
and Freddie King.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
we'll have a host of a couple of special guests, and I'm planning on having my son sit in and play a couple of those songs with us. Yeah, it's going to be a special event. I'm looking forward to that. But again, the JeffEngelbertBand.com and the Jeff Engelbert Band Facebook page, people can find us there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So looking forward to catching you here with this upcoming event that you're going to be showcasing with Johnny Rawls himself. And thanks for the leak as well, because now I'm going to keep that one on tap for December.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff. Been a pleasure having you join me today. I appreciate you a ton.
Thank you so much, Gordy. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
You got it.
All right. Bye-bye.